Okay, back to business here. You saw from our last video that we're having a little bit of trouble trimming the objects from each other, and I think it has to do with Dynamesh, and it works better if only one object has Dynamesh on. So I went ahead and made two new cylinders. I haven't done any Dynamesh smoothing with them or anything like that, and I'm just going to put Dynamesh on the top one. So the bottom one is the inner one. I'm going to change that to the cut sphere shapes here. And then click on the top one and turn on Dynamesh. Control, click and drag off to the side. Alright, now when I go back here and merge down, then when I click and drag, it should cut it out. Bada bing! A little bit of a pain in the butt. I don't know why it's such a rigmarole, and sometimes it decides to work and sometimes it doesn't. You saw in the last video that it worked on certain objects but not on others. But I figured it out. We're good to go. We've got our collar cut. So now we can keep going. So after it's cut, it does look just a smidge big, but I still have to chunkify his neck a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and kind of smooth this out and everything. Just double check Dynamesh is still on. Alright. Alright. It's looking pretty good. And I will shrink this whole thing just a little bit. Alright. Now, before I go ahead and rotate this into place, what I want to do is get those little rivets on here. So I'm going to work on that next. Which all those are is a few little spheres. So go ahead and insert a sphere and go down to deformation. I'm going to offset it, move it forward so I can see it. That needs to be sized down dramatically. And let's move that down kind of into place a little bit so I can see if it's still too tall or not. Size it a little bit more. Alright. So that is in place on the z-axis. Put it in place on x. Alright, and then I'll change the size a little bit so it slightly ellipses like my drawing. There we go. There's one collar rivet. They look slightly flatter. I don't want to make it too flat because when you're 3D printing, you always have to go a little bit, you should always define the shapes a little bit more than you're drawing, because everything kind of doesn't turn out quite as emphasized once it's 3D printed. So it's better to be just have a little more emphasis on the shapes than you're drawing, so that once they're 3D printed, it looks pretty close to your drawing. If your grooves aren't deep enough, or if your shapes aren't protruding enough, then once it's 3D printed, you lose a little bit of that definition. So better to go a little bit extra, and then once it's 3D printed at a small size, it looks great. All right. So it looks like I have about 8 of these. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this, and then under deformation I can mirror it, but I'm going to mirror it to the Z, and that puts it exactly in the right spot in the back. Perfection. So now, just to make it easy on me, I'm going to go ahead and merge these two together, so the front and the back are one shape or object. And then when I duplicate this, I should be able to, oh, duplicated the eye. But you know what? Let's just mirror that eye over while we have it. Did I? No, maybe I didn't. Maybe that was just, I don't know why it was showing up that way. It should show up with 2. Oh, there, it refreshed. Okay, so now I'm going to rotate this. And you can see I can rotate it all the way around that ring perfectly. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. So then I have my 4 corners of that. And then, to make it even simpler on myself, I'm going to merge these two together. And then duplicate that. And then under deformation, I just have to rotate this 45 degrees. Bam! I've got all my rivets done pretty quickly. So now I'm just going to merge those together so all my rivets are one shape. Now when I'm rotating this ring to kind of fit the angle of his neck here, I'm going to leave the rivets separate, and I'll show you how you can rotate them both in place pretty easily. So I'm just going to click on my collar ring, turn off my rivets for now, and then I'm going to use the deformation for rotating just so I can get it exact. Take one more glance at my drawing here, and then I think it's X that I'll be rotating. Yep. So kind of figure out about where it's going to be. Maybe about there. Maybe about, let's say 50. So 50, you got to keep that in mind because we're going to have to use these same elements for the rivets. And then I'm going to offset it down, let's say by 40, and then bring it forward by 43. Double check that that looks all right. Looks pretty good to me. So, you remember those three numbers? Go back up here. Click on our rivets. And there may be a better way to do this, but this seems to work pretty well for me. 50. And then 40 on the Y. 43 on the Z. And then you're exactly where you need to be. And you didn't have to merge those together if you weren't ready to yet. Alright, let's get that other eye in there just for beauty's sake. Duplicate that guy. Deformation, mirror it. Cool. So he's coming along. He's starting to look like our character. We'll have to thicken up that neck, everything. But at this point, what you're going to be doing, or what I was trying to emphasize in the last video and this one, is you're trying to make basic shapes more than anything. Since the collar is pretty basic to begin with, we've got it pretty much where we need it to be. But other shapes like the face, the teeth, the hands, those are going to be defined as we go along. But what we really need to do is to get some main elements in there to start blocking out this character. So I'm going to insert another sphere. Just going to go ahead and turn on Dynamesh right away because I use that on every shape pretty much anyway. Size that up. Bring it down. This is going to be the main body shape. Not worried too much with size because I'm going to tweak that as we go along. Alright, so now we can move it. I'm going to make sure that my X is on for doing the same thing on both sides of the shape. Let's start with a little inflate. Just again, I'm using Alt on the keyboard to do reverse inflate to kind of shrink areas as I'm going along. It's going to have some sort of tailish part of his body here as it goes along. It's got a little bit of a shoulder thing. It doesn't have to be exact right now. It's more of trying to get the general idea so you can start kind of filling it out as a whole. It's good to kind of work on the whole figure at the same time, or at least to be able to see it all kind of at the same time, rather than finishing one piece completely and then moving on to the other pieces of the body. Alright. Alright, that's generally his body shape here. Throw some legs and arms in there. I'm generally using spheres most of the time. It just seems to work well for me. But of course, whatever seems to work for your figure, whatever whatever you like. Again, I'm kind of just making a general rough idea of sizing for this. And again, you can use this move tool as well if that seems to work a little bit better for you. Move and rotate into place. When I'm working on arms and legs, this rotate feature here seems to work pretty well. I'll show you that in just a second. Let me duplicate this just for the sake of not having to re-dynamesh something. Alright. So I'll kind of move that into place for the leg. Of course, I need to curve it and all that. But going back to this, what I was saying as far as rotating, what's kind of nice, you can kind of create a line across here, and if you're using rotate and click on the corner, kind of rotates it based on that anchor point on the top. So that can be kind of a benefit for kind of rotating joints in place and things like that. Can be kind of helpful. Kind of start getting your shapes in place. Alright, he's starting to get a bit of a body here. His legs are too tall. He's got really tiny legs. So just keep resizing things, reshaping things as you're going along. Once you get a general idea of placement and everything, then you can start adding more detail. But you want to get kind of everything kind of in place, a rough idea of the shapes, and then you can start defining things more. I just duplicated that shape, moving it into place for using with the foot. Again, this isn't obviously the shape of the foot, but you got to start somewhere. And then I can kind of rotate that to what makes sense and angle the leg joint a little bit and all that. I'm just trying to get a general idea here, and then I can work from there. Duplicate that, mirror it over to the other side. Bada bing, bada boom. And then as you're defining things, like his two legs here are essentially the same. So what I'll do is I'll create the entire leg kind of basically the way it should be, even with the little details on it and everything. And then once I have it all looking like this, then I'll duplicate it and mirror it to the other side, since they're essentially the same, except maybe just rotate it a little bit from there. So you generally just continue adding detail, continue defining things, until you have everything kind of in place. I'm going to use this for for the start of the tail, even though it's not even the right shape, but that's alright. And what I want to do in order to make sure this guy stands up well, so I'm going to make sure that the bottom of this tail lines up with the bottom of these feet so that it kind of helps him stand up. You can see, even if I'm using a shape that's not even exactly the right shape for something, it's very easy to continue refining it till it becomes the shape you want it to be. If you get some weird wonky thing like that going on, just remesh it, smooth it out. If you smooth it long enough, you can get rid of any imperfection or move it up into the body where no one will see it. Alright. There we go. Starting to look like a tail. And I need to bring all of this a little closer to his body. Again, that's all part of the refining process. You start adding more of the features as you're going along, and you can kind of see where, hey, this might be a little too far out, this might not be far enough out, things like that. And you can kind of just keep refining until it starts looking like what you want it to look like. And so that's kind of how you build up the basic shapes. And then I'll go through adding a little bit more detail and refining in the next video. But thanks for watching. I'll be back with some more details soon.